How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Maddie?
Good. I'm glad you were able to get on okay. Everything seems to be working well.
So far, so good.
Perfect. If you're ready, then we'll just jump right in.
Absolutely.
So one of the first questions I had, I was kind of toying around with some of the things I should ask you, was what made you consider coming to Goucher for your master's? I know you completed your undergrad in Rhode Island. Definitely Maryland's a bit of a change from that. What sort of led to that decision for you?
Sure. So also my is in arts administration, and one of the big programs is right here in Philadelphia, where I live and work. And I still came to Goucher because the Goucher Low Residency program actually was what allowed me to not stop working, not stop my family. And in fact, I did all three at once. I did 3 years of grad school with 3 residencies every summer, in addition to having my first child, and I continued to work full time the whole entire time. So
That's a
um,
lot.
it is, but it was great. And it was Goucher that allowed me to do all of that and keep things on track and not make grad school be a break in any one of those things that I didn't want to stop.
I like that. That definitely, I can see where that specific type of program would really fit that. So how many years after you did your undergrad did you pursue your graduate degree? Did you work a little bit beforehand or did you jump sort of right in?
Yeah, no, I worked quite a bit in between. I wound up doing my whole discovering what my career path was thing straight out of college. I graduated my undergrad in 99, and I graduated my master's in 16. So -3, that's the difference.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful to do a bunch of career exploration, have a couple of jobs, have a working knowledge under my belt before I came into the arts administration program, because then the arts administration program got to just solidify all of that. And I made tons of great contacts at Goucher in the field, which was amazing.
What made you consider arts administration and going back to getting another degree? Because I know some people are, once they get into the workforce, it's really hard for them to go back to school. And like you said before, you didn't want it to interrupt any of the things you already knew you wanted to do, like raise your family and be involved in these residencies. So what about going back to school made it worthwhile for you?
Um, Really, it was the right time in my career to circle back and get a little bit of best practices, a little bit of academic, a little bit of case study education in my field, which by then it was solidified as arts administration. This was not a career switch for me, although a lot of people come to the program also or do grad school for a career change, a change of path as well. In my case, I had already committed to arts administration, realized that's what I was doing and wanted to continue to do. And I wanted to get that well-rounded. What the Goucher program gave me was experience, then deeper dive in some of the elements of the business that I wasn't doing. I had had education experience, I had had a little bit of communications experience and other administrative experience, but I got to dive into development and marketing and management and leadership and all of those other things through the Goucher program that really helped build out my working career knowledge. And it helped me, quite frankly, advance fairly quickly in the 3 years that I was in the program. I got my new job, which is where I'm at now, at the Annenberg Center. But I started 3 positions ago at the Annenberg Center. And I was able to build up through an entry-level position in marketing, then into the development office a little bit, and then into the office of the managing director and the executive director, which is where I am now as an offshoot, now doing engagement work. So it just, all of those steps were, I don't want to say entirely Gouchers were, you know what I mean? There was other things that had to do with them, but a lot of the foundation was thanks to the degree at Goucher, the experience at Goucher, as well as the faculty and my connections and my new, you know what I mean, my cohort and things at the Goucher program.
It's really good to hear that. And you actually answered one of the questions I had, not quite, but like I was looking at your LinkedIn and I noticed that you'd been at the University of Pennsylvania at the Annenberg Center for, I think, close to 7 years. But you kind of built yourself up in multiple positions. How did you go about going through those transitions and working up and saying, okay, I deserve a promotion to here, or applying for promotions within. What was that process like? Because that's something I feel like nowadays isn't super common. A lot of people just kind of switch between jobs and are ready for a change instead of moving up.
Yeah, it's true. Those things are apologies. That's my 2-year-old. um, so I think that there was a little bit of luck of timing because especially in my field, in the arts, the right stepping stones don't always open at the same organization. That's just fact. And it is, you're absolutely correct, more common now that you have to jump from organization to organization to make those appropriate level steps. So a little bit of luck of timing, but also just the fact that I was, dare I say, confident enough to always express to my direct supervisors, and I've been lucky to have some really great ones, that I'm interested in staying and I'm interested in growing. And I think that that's a really important thing across the board. When you're in any job, in any, level in your career, when you're in your undergrad, when you're in your grad, I think having that direct line of communication with whomever you're working with or for, that you're interested in not just doing your job, but excelling at your job and moving on to the next level of your job makes you an asset. And I think that that's a really good bit of information that I could share with people, because if you don't do that, then you get to just do the same job over and over again often. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you mean. And also about the fact that you knew you wanted to stay with this organization. I'm assuming you liked it. You wouldn't be here for 7 years if you didn't like it. Um, and describing to them that you're planning on staying. You'd like to stay, but you also think you can be more valuable in other roles and you have room to grow. And I'm glad that sort of Goucher helped you facilitate that and getting the extra skills you needed to continue growing in that position beyond the skills that you learned in undergrad and through your other working
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely.
How has COVID impacted the current position you're in? I'm not sure if you've had a transition in jobs. You said you're doing a little bit of some other work, but how has COVID impacted this? Because performing arts is a very physical, close field.
Yeah. So the field of performing arts are devastated right now. I wish I had the stats at my fingertips to share with you, because it is mind blowing, the number of people and the amount of our economy in the United States at large that is out of work and stalled right now. I mean, the latest news, just as a minute example, is that all of my union friends who work at Disney, one of the biggest, operators in the arts, corporate arts, but nonetheless the arts, is starting to lay off and furlough all their union. And they had already furloughed everybody else up until then. Anyways, there's the Kimmel Center in Philadelphia where I, work has lost most of its staff at this point. The McCarter has lost in Princeton. At Princeton University has lost most of its staff. This goes on and on and on and on and on. Lincoln Center is closed. The Kennedy Center down by you guys, the big ones. The arts are devastated right now. So I am crazy lucky where I am that we operate on a small staff to begin with. And usually that's not helpful to all of us. Usually that's a weakness of ours, but because of COVID, it has been a strength of ours that we're already small and mighty. Many people I work with at the Annenberg Center are also partially furloughed or furloughed right now and working modified schedules. But we have decided to be innovative under the leadership of our current director. And we had a very, again, strategy and luck and all of these things come together in a kind of way. And we got some funding from a very generous donor to buy some cameras. And we are doing live camera shoots, which is a whole different art form. And it's not the live performing arts, but artists are coming to our venue right now. They are being recorded in solos or duos, not the full company of Martha Graham, but a couple dancers, things like that. And we're live broadcasting, which again, I can't emphasize enough that that's an entirely different art form than the team that I work with, both in programming, in production, in marketing. All of us are doing very different jobs. The learning curve is steep. And I would also say that that's one of the career-wise, one of the most important things to develop is your skills to be versatile, your skills to be innovative, your skills to be flexible and collaborative, because all of those things are what's getting us through right now. Any of us that are still lucky enough to have jobs. And again, I can't emphasize that there's not very many of us lucky to still be working through this in the performing arts. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you still are able to continue working and have things. And I guess, realize the impact that this has had on the performing arts. I guess I assumed, I was like, oh, things have probably slowed down a bit and things are different.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, I guess, the quantity of people and the
Yeah.
substantial impact on our economy that's had. And that's like a little scary, especially for people in your position or people that are looking to get into your position. This isn't the best time to enter the job market. And you mentioned that being flexible is so important. Are those skills and the collaboration skills you also mentioned something you developed in undergrad, or something you felt like you really developed, or undergrad or graduate school, or something you really developed in the workforce and it kind of took being in these roles and in this position to kind of like pound in for you?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I think they're skills that you're always continuing to develop. I think that I've been developing them since I was, I don't want to say born, but I think since I was even younger than undergrad, you know. And then I was a theater major, and in theater you do stuff like this. You are flexible, you improv, you troubleshoot, because it never goes the way you plan. And then, you know, building on that, some of the career experiences I had, not to mention some of the life experiences I've had, because they require troubleshooting too. You know, without going into details, all of us have different experiences through career, through education, through personal experience that build who we become. And all of those work together to form that kind of innovation and creativity and stuff that I think I have built up. Which is why I also say to anyone listening, you know, take the opportunities to try something different. If you have an elective, don't do the same old. Flex those muscles that force you to be creative, and things like that, because no matter what field, it doesn't matter if you're in the same field as I am or in a completely different field. If you're an engineer, if you're, you know, a business person working on Wall Street, any of the above all require problem solving at a different level and communication at a different level. So developing those skills it can be done all the time and should be done all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can they build on each other, and each experience like helps hone those skills in a little more. And I'm assuming COVID has made it a very different type of way to communicate and collaborate. And like you said, even the art forms that you're doing right now are very different from what you would traditionally do. So we've talked a little bit about like what your company does and sort of what their role is. What is your role in this? What do you sort of direct? Do you direct the performances themselves or something completely different?
So my role, because of how I came up through the Annenberg Center, and this happens a lot in a lot of fields, you know, I wish I could tell you there's a formula, but there's not. So my role involves in education and engagement. That's my title, right? So start there. For our Performing Arts Center, which is a major university performing arts center on a campus, our audiences for engagement and education, what I do are three kind of separate groups, buckets, whatever you want to label those. One is K through 12, young audiences, typical traditional educational model. One is our public audiences, everyone who comes to shows at the Annenberg Center. And because of the diversity of the work that we present, I go blank for a second.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but just a quick sec.
I'm on silent, but you can't stop people from calling you, can you? So anyways, so three audiences: young adults, young audiences, the campus students on Penn's campus, and our general public. And any programming that has to do with facilitating or wrapping around or, you know, adding to deeper dives into what is being presented on the stage, you know, post-show discussions, chats about performances, artist chats, residencies of artists, anything like that, our student matinee series, our children's festival. So anything that seems supplemental to the actual live performances, I have some hand in. Anything that is, events that are deeper diving into the arts that we're presenting, I'm either coordinating or leading or, advising or something like that. And then in addition to that, I also have maintained some of my previous responsibilities. I came up through the executive and artistic director's office where I still am. And so I handle our artist contracts. So I've gotten a lot of experience doing contracts for the artists we present and being a liaison to agents and things like that. I do a lot of still being in the programming office. We also, things like accessibility now are falling on my plate. So earlier today, I was arranging for captioning for one of our live events. So it's a wide variety. And again, it's anything that are those supplemental elements to the actual live performances themselves. And then I work very closely with a production team to house and take care of and advance the performances when they come to town and things like that. It's a lot of ops, a lot of logistics and things that I wind up then also being involved in by the nature of the logistics of what I do.
I feel like that keeps it really interesting, though. It's always a little different. There's always different events going on. You're not getting bored, which is really good.
That is true. That is true.
I had another question about sort of the field that you're in. Would you be able to share any sort of the trends within your field that students should be aware of that would help them enhance like the necessary technological or core skills that they should have if they're interested in this field?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because there's a different answer to that question for every probably aspect of the field that you're in. On the administrative side for me, it has been most useful. And let me define that. For me, I'm saying administration and everything that's the business aspect of the business falls into that. So in the nonprofit sector, especially, you've got development team. In nonprofit and corporate, you've got a marketing team, you've got a programming team, you've got a business and then, a general manager and a finance person, all of those things, production team. And then education and engagement and things like that as additional departments within the administration. So within administration, I think it's handy. There's not a formula. I think it's good to learn about all of those aspects. I think it's really good to learn about the art forms because it's always handy to understand what your collaborators and what your teammates and what the other people you're working with to bring the art to fruition are doing in their jobs and understanding how it all connects because there's, a lot of people will say we operate in silos just like any other business. And unfortunately that sometimes winds up being true, but those silos do overlap and do impact one another. And the more that they can be viewed as a Venn diagram and each of us understand what the other departments or other, areas of our field are doing. Now, I would just add then the other answer to the question, which I'm not going to address, is people in the arts, production is its own career track. Anything technical is its own career track and requires an entirely different approach. If you're on the performance side of it, if you're a performer, entirely different approach. What other? Designers, entirely different approach. Directors and choreographers and those, a little bit different still. So I think that what it all has in common in the arts is that I hate to say this, but there's no direct path. It's about putting yourself out there over and over again on all levels and learning as much as you can and taking advantage of as many opportunities that you can. What that little bit of advice that you asked me for when we, set this up is show up. Go, show up, be aware of what's happening in the field. In terms of trends, right now we're not in a trend. We're in a great big pause. And when it starts up again, those people watching that are in undergrad right now, when it starts back up again, it's not just going to be like a light switch. It's not going to be, we're off right now, we're on tomorrow. There's going to be a slow, steady, methodical return to all of these functionalities. And it's not going to be like we get to open to the audiences one day where we didn't have them yesterday. It's going to be a small audience. What does that look like? And again, continuing to reinvent the wheel, and all this digital that we started doing and just kind of did sloppy and figured out as we went and built the car while we were driving it. How does that stay, some of it actually? And how does that change what we've been doing and what we've been taught to do? So that's, I mean, if I'm going to look in a crystal ball for a trend, I would dare say, I would risk saying that the trend is going to be how all of this continues to coexist together, and how some of the old comes back in a healthy way, given everything that's happened in the last 7 months.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I feel like you said before, there's going to be a lot of change. Things are going to be different than how they were conducted 7 months, however long it's been, 8 months ago, probably close to at this point. Things are going to be different. And you make a really good point about that. But the one thing that I feel like is not going to be different is the qualities that like students have, or that the employees in this industry will have. Are there any specific qualities of the team that you work with, or of each individual member of that team, that you feel like are really important and really essential to this field?
Ooh. I think we've talked about a couple of the big ones: the creativity, the resilience. Resilience is a big one in this field, especially for those on the front lines, on the stages. Resilience is a huge one. Other qualities, I think open-mindedness is a big one. I think being a constant lifelong learner is a big one. I think, yeah, and lifelong learner goes hand in hand with taking advantage of any professional development opportunities that come along, searching them out, finding mentorship in the existing field. And I would circle back to where we started in this conversation with that, is that, you know, as you, if, in my case, I went to Goucher for graduate school, right? So if anybody is considering future graduate school in their plan, I would say less about, you know, when you do it or how you do it or where you do it, but more about what the individual program has to fill in your gaps of knowledge and make you a wholer, fuller person for the career that you're pursuing and that hopefully you love. Because this is one of those, arts administration, you don't do it unless you love it. Like, there's other careers that you can do and not love for other reasons, but this isn't one of them. For me, what helped at Goucher was the faculty, who are not just teachers, and they are great teachers, but they are also active participants and actively working in my field in the various aspects that they taught. So I learned law from somebody who was working for the Smithsonian as general counsel, you know, things like that. And then those people are your teachers, they're your mentors, and they become your friends and your greatest colleagues that you can call up at a moment's notice. So I kind of transitioned you there a little bit. Sorry about that, but
No, that's okay.
Qualities to circling back to all of this that I think was so valuable, like, you know, what I got from Goucher.
Yeah. And I think it's very cool to see how those are so interwoven and how it's helped you develop those qualities, and also the influence it's had on your career. I know you said previously that obviously it was a long time between when you finished your undergrad and when you went back to school. Mm-hmm. What influenced your decision that this was the career that you wanted to go into, that you loved arts administration, it's what you wanted to continue doing?
So for me, it was a really organic process. Listen, I went to undergrad and I was an undecided major. I had no idea. I had a lot of dance background in my high school and younger. You know, I was a typical since I was age 5. And dance held a really important role in my life, but it was never what I was going to do in my mind. That wasn't true. And then somewhere along the line, I couldn't say no. I couldn't say no to being involved in the theater in this way and learning more about theater. And so that's how I wound up both a dual major in theater and communications, because the idea of communications and how people interact in that way also interested me. And when I got out, again, everybody's story is different, right, you guys? So you can't follow a formula. So this is not a career plan by any stretch of the imagination, but I got out of college and I wasn't sure what I was going to pursue, but I had a theater degree. And so I was like, I'm going to do theater. And at the same time, this is where the life stuff comes in. My now husband was going to get his master's degree in theater. So I followed him out to Indiana, of all places. Spent a year or two there, got out of there as fast as we could once he had his degree, went to Chicago, big theater city. And I wound up looking for jobs. And I found out really quickly that I needed the stability of the management side, and my type A personality fit the management side. So here was this epiphany that I had when I got my first job in a place called the Three Arts Club of Chicago, working their front desk in this real huge residency in the historic neighborhood for women artists. It was fantastic. Where I was using all of my hard administrative skills for the arts. Brilliant. It was brilliant. And this was at a time that was slightly before one could major in this, you know? And so parallel to me having that epiphany, other programs were starting to develop and it wasn't just performance that you majored in then, it was these other aspects of the business that you could then go to places and learn. And I, wound up couple different jobs here and there pursuing the business side of the business, and took a break in the middle, took a little hiatus to do some communication stuff for a different nonprofit because that's just the way, life led me, and said, nope, I've had enough of that. I need to get back to the arts. That part of me is not being, that bucket's not being filled right now. And that's when I wound up at the Walnut Street Theater in their education department. That's what got me to Philly. And then once I'd grown there enough and was ready for the next thing, I was transitioning, and this was at the same time as I started my program at Goucher, the master's program, and wound up getting hired at the Annenberg Center. And so that's how it happened for me, and everybody has their own unique, story of that. And they're all totally different.
I think it's awesome also to see how many different ways you can approach this and go into it and get your degree, take some time, learn things. And I think you've really given our students a really great approach to how you did it, what the skills they need to succeed in this industry, and how it's going to be a little different right now. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to know, was there anything else you wanted to tell students or recommend to them about your industry or about entering the job market right now that you think would be useful for them?
I have no epiphanies about entering the job market right now. I work at a university, so I have seen a couple students that have worked with me as work studies enter fields of their own, as well as the performing arts field. And it has taken time. It has taken patience. It has taken perseverance. It's a couple that I have coming up to graduate in 2021 are already considering grad school who wouldn't have otherwise. So it's a time for taking that breath to think about your approach. And I think the best advice I can give on that regard, Maddie, is that just put things out there in the universe. You don't know whether they're going to come back to you, but you don't need to worry about that until they do. And when they do, you can make a choice either way. And when you put a bunch of things out there in the universe, then a bunch of them come back, then that's where you find you have a choice. But if you don't do that, you don't get a choice. So I think that it's an important time to be patient and resilient, but also keep putting things out there, keep searching. Don't lose your stamina, because this one's going to be a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And not only for people in the arts, but just students everywhere doing anything at this point. That perseverance is essential, and just keeping at it, not giving up, is so important. And I just wanted to, again, thank you so much for coming today and participating. And I'd love to potentially get students in contact with you if they'd like. And if I could reach out to you via email about that, that would be great as well. And again, thank you so, so much for coming today.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And yes to all of the above.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have such a good day.
Thank you. Bye.